The next thing would be, do we have any evidence outside of the New Testament that corroborates what the New Testament people were saying? So in other words, is there actually anybody else that says what these people were writing were the same as what we're seeing now? So you don't have just one source. Do we have multiple sources? And the answer is absolutely yes. You have Josephus, you have Tacitus, you have Suetonius, and other ancient historians all refer to Christ. I mean, as early as 93 AD, you had the historian Josephus. He spoke of Jesus being crucified and spoke of Christians being around the world already and spreading the gospel and being on fire for God. So we certainly have evidence outside of the Holy Scriptures that would corroborate exactly some of the testimonies that were in the New Testament. Also, the next thing is, what about the Gnostic Gospels? A lot of people are concerned about these Gnostic Gospels, and you know, did the early church fathers just try to keep out things that were really, really important? Well, let's take the same objective look at those Gnostic Gospels. See, these are a collection of writings from 200 to 300 years AD, which is much, much later than when the apostles and and Paul and John were writing their New Testament. They also give you a very different Jesus, which is a big problem. They give you more of a Greek philosopher Jesus than the universally accepted, historically accurate New Testament Gospels. So then, really, you have to make a choice. Not only are they less accurate compared to the New Testament Gospels or canon, but they're also later, and they also contradict it. So you have to make a choice on what Jesus are you going to believe. You're going to be the Jesus that is the Palestinian Jesus or the Greek philosopher Jesus. And the reality is, if you're going to take the historical objective look, you have to go with the Jesus of the New Testament every single time, unless you're someone who just wants to believe in, whatever it is that makes you happy. But if you want to believe in the truth, historically, any scientist would tell you that historically that this is definitely the best way to go if they're to look at it objectively. All right, so now between the last video and this, we have all the information. We know that what you're holding on to is absolutely reliable. Everything that we have in our hand is what we know of that is written. And everything that we have in our hand we know is accurate based on the facts, based on the evidence. And if anyone would dispute some of the evidence I've given, I'd really appreciate someone to give me a follow-up video about that. All right, so how do we know who Jesus was, right? Because it's not just a matter of what they wrote. It's a matter of, was Jesus who he said he was? But first we have to find out, who was Jesus? Who did he declare himself as? And how are we going to prove that? And just remember all the claims that he made. When Jesus pops on the scene, he's always a challenge to the status quo. He's always a challenge to exactly what's going on. It says in the Bible that no one spoke like Jesus because he spoke with his own authority. Instead of the authority of another rabbi. You have to understand that back then a rabbi always came in the name of another rabbi. So if you had a rabbi would always say, what I said I learned from X. Jesus was totally the opposite. He would say, I have the authority over this. I have the power over this. I have come to fulfill the law. And he used Isaiah chapter 61 when he was speaking in the temple of Nazareth. And he declares himself to be the Messiah in the temple. So he certainly was declaring himself to be Messiah. Who has seen me has seen the Father, he says. He declared himself to be Messiah to the Pharisees when he was before he was crucified. They asked him, "Are you the Messiah?" And he said, "I am." And then that was what they condemned him with. More than 80 times he is said to be the Son of Man, which is a prophecy, which is a declaration based on Daniel 7:13, which declares him to be Messiah. So it is without a doubt that Jesus believed himself to be the Messiah. So now we need to prove that what he declared was the truth. Is Jesus Christ the Messiah that he declares to be in the Bible, using the Bible? Now that we realize that it's an accurate document. The prophecies fulfilled by Christ, I think, will do that. I mean, if we were to just take this one set of scriptures, just take Isaiah 53, 6 through 9. It says, "All we like sheep are gone astray. We have turned every one on his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before the shearers is dumb. He opens not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When you read that, that's written in 800 BC, and it could only be defined as identifying Jesus Christ. There's no person in history that you or anybody, or any historian even, could chalk that up to being. So what I actually do is, because I told you where it came from, I ask you to do this because this will help you, because it's sort of like a fingerprint prophecy. I challenge you to write this prophecy down, Isaiah 53, 6 through 9. Put it on a piece of paper with nothing. Don't write Isaiah 53, 6 through 9, just the paragraph. Put it on a piece of paper and hand it to people and ask them to tell you who it was. I will tell you that just about everybody will say it's certainly Jesus and it comes from the New Testament. But you'll be able to say this doesn't come from the New Testament. This came from 800 years before he existed. So that's another thing I ask you to do, just to put Jesus to the test that way. And I challenge you to do that. His birth, his suffering as a servant, his Jerusalem entrance, as well as 45 other prophecies are fulfilled in him and by him that were written over 400 years before he was born. Quite a bit of prophetic confirmation in Jesus Christ. And also we have the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, that because they are scientifically dated to 200 BC, you have a lot of these prophecies in there, so then you know that these prophecies were certainly written before then and weren't later added to the Old Testament later. And mind you, they wouldn't have been added to the Old Testament because the Jewish people weren't a supporter of Jesus. So they wouldn't have added it to their Torah, they wouldn't have added it to their Talmud to make Jesus look good either. So you also have to consider that as well, because that is not even a real possibility that they would have done anything quite like that. The other thing I want to get to is there's some things like the Jerusalem entrance was something he did to typify himself as Messiah, but his birth in Bethlehem could not have been something that was controlled. And you have the prophecies that could have been fulfilled by nobody but him, like his birth, but his suffering. And you have things that he did to show I am Messiah, like when he entered Jerusalem in, according to the book of Zechariah. You have things like Psalm 22 that says he was pierced in the hands and pierced in his feet, and it describes a crucifixion. Mind you, during the time of David, this was 1000 BC when this was written, and crucifixion didn't even exist probably for hundreds of years. So if you were to ask a statistician, when fulfilling these 48 prophecies, if you're to look up, because there are studies online that'll show you the math involved with one person fulfilling these prophecies. So after me showing you that the Bible is extremely accurate, that the prophecies have all been written and documented to have been written before the birth of Jesus Christ, if you were to statistically look at these prophecies, the numbers are actually mathematically impossible that one person would have done this. So he has to be the Messiah based on those prophecies. It's really amazing. And I just encourage you to research that further. Alright, so now, what about the miracles, the healings, and the casting out of demons and things of this nature? What's interesting is that the people who like Jesus, sure, they said that he did the miracles, and people would agree with that, and they'd be like, yeah, they wrote it down so that it would, make his claims more legitimate. But the people that dislike him, the knowledge of too. I mean, you had the Pharisees that would say, he's doing these great miracles in the name of Satan, and they would see them. He raised Lazarus in front of many of the Pharisees, and they went back, and then they tried to figure out a way to kill Lazarus so that the testimony of Jesus' miracle would go away. And also the Talmud of the Jews even says that Jesus was a magician, which is not a compliment really at all, but it shows that he was doing some amazing works that they really couldn't explain. There's 40 miracles recorded in all, and Jesus' miracles, they were demonstrating the power of God, but not in the name of himself. It was very different because he did it always in the name of God and give God credit, which really is not like people who did so-called miracles in the past. Jesus also claimed to forgive sin, and since we know that only God can do that, was another declaration of his deity, but also an amazing miracle as well.